Amazing.
Is that my friend Yeston logging in? What's going on here?
I'm seeing so many familiar faces. This is.
Well, I haven't got any faces yet. I've just got names.
I see everyone. Everyone is looking incredibly sharp, amazed, and just gorgeous.
Let me at them. Why? Hang on. Maybe something's not.
Look, I told you, you put your camera too far.
That's not why I can't see people. Silly. No, Zodwa, I can't see Heather, I can't see Christine, I can't see.
I think those people have just elected to keep.
Oh, okay, so I can see that. I mean, you're looking sharp still. Respect to the top 2 rows, but I thought you could see everyone. I was like, no. Okay.
No. Afternoon, all. Thank you very much for joining us. We're all very glad that you could be here with us and for this conversation between myself and Natalie. And it is just that, a conversation, because I guess in some ways we know of each other and we know each other, and we've been part of this crazy industry for a number of years, kind of crossing paths, mostly on the South Bank or on the Cut in London. And and Natalie has gone on a wild journey kind of across the country, and now sort of based in just outside London, in Watford,
yeah.
I think.
You know what's mad, Gbolahan? We first met when I was a resident at the Royal Court watching Theatre Delights in 2008 at the Almeida, and now I run Theatre Footy, right?
Yeah.
I remember, I actually remember you saying I went for that job.
Yeah.
We're always going for the same jobs. This is,
you know what I mean?
This was the RTYDS one, not this one. But yeah, so it's mad to come full circle and to be here, you under commission at Theatre Footy, me running it in light of, and that was in 2008, so that was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been wild, and like I think that's something. I mean, in a way, I just wanted to start with for you, because I invited you to have this conversation with me, essentially. So I just want to try and take on that the mantle of chairing appropriately for everyone who's kind of graced us with their presence. Where did because you grew up in Scotland, right?
Yes, born and bred Edinburgh.
Okay, and so where did sort of theatre start for you? And as in, when did it become part of your consciousness, as much as also when did you feel as if it was something that you wanted to pursue? And was your Blackness and your African heritage part of that kind of journey from the very beginning, or did it feel much more important as part of your identity a bit later down, so to speak?
Yeah, so my relationship with theatre started through participating. So I danced for a very long time. I was part of a youth theatre. I wrote plays and stories about my teachers. So it was all through sort of participation. But
what sort of dance did you do?
Ballet, tap, disco, Latin and jazz, Gbolahan.
Jeez, come on.
I mean, you've seen those moves. Come on, people. You question. You've seen me on press nights. Come on. I think I actually wanted to go to dance school when I was thinking about what I wanted to be, but my body was not made for ballet, which at the time was considered, the foundation of all dance training. And I probably then wanted to be an actor, and then that moment where you get really sort of self-conscious and realize that you're not the best in the class, and somehow I don't really understand how I decided I wanted to be a director, specifically an artistic director.
Oh wow, you went straight for being the head honcho,
Yeah, yeah. And you know why? It's because I had grown up at the Traverse. So I'd done a young writers program at the Traverse. I'd gone to see plays with my school there, and it felt, you know, and I must have had access to Philip Howard, who was the artistic director at the time, and something about the way that he moved, something about the office he might have had, something about the way he talked or what he wore, just like how he presented himself made me think, I want a piece of that. And I say that the rest of my experience and journey has really been trying to prove myself wrong, that was what I wanted to do. And now when I reflect on it, I can identify that I had a desire to bring people together, to broker, and to host, and that's what I was responding to in the role of artistic director. But it is quite an odd thing to have known existed and said I want to do.
Just to touch on like your time at the Traverse in Edinburgh, was that an organization that felt like a home, or at least somewhat embraced your voice and individuality? At I don't know what age you were, or did that feel like it was empowered through the relationships you had with certain facilitators, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird one, right? So a Black Scottish girl, super shy, mum, whole family mixed race, not working class nurses, chefs, etc. I don't have a memory of going to see a play with my mum, but she insists, and she of course would now, that she took me to see plays when I was a child. I don't remember it, like my memories of the doing. And if we look at the Traverse now and we think about what the Traverse was like, so I'm 36, so like 20 years ago, it was pretty monoculture. There's no reason why this little Black girl would think that this place could be a home for her. So I don't really get it. I don't really get, other than the investment of time and the kind of importance of those participation projects, right? Those things that access you through school and allow you to develop a relationship through school, and then to have your own relationship with a building. I think there was something about, I was used to being the only one. In fact, Gbolahan, when I met you at Theatre Delights, I was like, rah, there are loads of Black people here. Like, I'm Scottish, I'm used to being the only Black person in the room, only Black person in my family. So weirdly, like, I also don't get intimidated by being in spaces that feel like they're not made for me, because that is my life. And certainly my life growing up in Scotland. So I think those are the things that, and I think also actually my mum, I have no memory of my mum sort of following the traditional immigrant stereotype, which says, no, you can't do that, you have to become a lawyer or a nurse or a doctor or whatever. I don't have any memory of that. I only have memories of her facilitating me. So I think it was those three things that made it possible for me to imagine myself in a sector that didn't look like me, that wasn't particularly welcoming, that didn't particularly see me, but I was able to kind of make space for myself and not budge, essentially, for 20 years.
And so what, did you study theatre then? Did you study?
Yeah. What's mad is I studied at 17 theatre with arts management. So for those of us who know what artistic directorship is, that is those two subjects essentially. So I must have known, it couldn't have just been seeing Philip and going, I want to be Philip. Like, I must have taken it seriously. I must have researched and committed to that gut feeling that I had. So I did. And when my mum was moving out of childhood home, I was cleaning up my stuff, and I won a drama prize at school. And I think the book that I bought as a result of the prize was something like arts marketing. So I really was like taking the shit seriously. Sorry, baby. There's a baby there.
And what? So what? You didn't necessarily think that it was always theatre. You didn't necessarily think you were going to be a different type of artist, or had other sort of expressions apart from your early interest in dance and performing?
So I wrote, and I wrote poetry when I was 7, and stories. I can't write fiction. I can't write dramatic text, but I do some journalism, and yeah, but no, it was always theatre, which has meant that those crises of confidence that as someone who's saying, like, at 16 I knew who I wanted to be and the job I wanted to be, like, just because I knew that has not made this straightforward or plain sailing, right? There have been many crises of confidence, and in each of those moments I've gone, oh damn, that I was like, why didn't my mum make me go and do a medicine degree? Like, why didn't I think about other sectors, because I feel trapped in this sector because I've only ever worked in the arts. So yeah, and then I guess just to answer the second part of your original question, that and it's very difficult to say. I had a really complex relationship with my identity of being a British African, a Scottish African. My mum is half white and half Cameroonian, and my dad is Nigerian, and they split up when I was 1. And I think Africa has been very, very difficult for my mum, so she didn't really facilitate a relationship with my heritage. I used to, and this is awful, when I was little, refer to myself as a bounty. Like, I had a very complex relationship with my identity and not feeling black enough, but feeling too black for Scotland. I actually had experience with Africa in 2010, and I had said, like, I had felt not African enough for this company. And so as I moved into my sort of late 20s, so I got this job when I was 30, had grown into my identity as being like, I'm African enough because I'm African. Do you know what I mean? Like, and looking to, and culture, I guess, multiplying the narrative about what it was to be African to mean that I could start to see myself in culture and start to go, oh yeah, I am part of a diaspora. But yeah, those early days, no, my blackness, my Africanness didn't play a part, because it didn't play a part in my life, really. And I'm ashamed to say, guys, to all 48 of you or whatever, 31, don't go tweeting this. Like, I've done some learning and some growing, but like, yeah, I think when you're not surrounded by people who can facilitate a kind of confidence, a cultural confidence, and help you understand who you are, even when the world looks different to you, like, that's really difficult. And I was lost.
Well, I can tell that you're not anymore, and I think and I think that's probably a journey that we've all been on, because to a certain extent we are constantly being asked to kind of define ourselves in opposition, or in the context of the kind of monoculture that we're surrounded by, within a kind of British or European context, where we want to quote unquote feel assimilated to a certain extent, but not necessarily to the point where it feels as if we've been subsumed into the kind of the hegemony of kind of European or Eurocentric ideas of being human, and what does it mean to be be British, and having kind of that as a context that has predominantly informed you against what you're being told in the home, and and if the home is trying to facilitate some of that sense of feeling assimilated, to kind of make you more grounded rather than somehow othered by the society around you, it can create a lot of conflict, as much as also when are you empowered enough to kind of strongly feel as if you can assert your individual voice, as much as also your kind of a critical eye on what's happening around you, and how does that critical eye start to inform you potentially as an artist, or with whichever kind of artistic medium you choose. And in this case, when did you think that your critical eye or that sort of journey of discovery start to potentially influence you as an artist, as a theatre maker, as a artistic leader, and why when you saw that Theatre for Hotzi was looking for an artistic director, how did you feel you could articulate who you were as an artist in relation to a Black and Afrocentric theatre company to be the most appropriate person to sort of take them through the transition of re-engaging, or as much as also finding the stories that African people within the British context and diaspora can relate to? That's a loaded question, so hopefully you got some of it.
Yeah, I should take notes, mate. And I should say that I was saying to Gbolahan that the idea of getting to spend an hour thinking about practice and who we are outside of COVID is like really refreshing, but also challenging, because like I'd forgotten that I existed pre-COVID, right? All of our conversations are all about coronavirus. So let's think. So maybe I'll start at the end. So having been invited previously and said no, the next time it came up, because of the journey personally that I'd gone on, which had allowed myself to accept all the bits of me, right? To accept that I was African, but I was also Scottish, and I was also Scottish, right? Because I think the other thing is about this but conversation, that we're constantly having to like posit ourselves in opposition to ourselves, and yet here I am, a person who is all of these things, not living in opposition with myself. And I saw the job come up this time, and I thought, isn't it funny that 4 years ago I didn't feel African enough to run this company, and yet I'm like Nigerian and like core audience, and therefore I'm the perfect person to run this organization, because I felt that the diaspora was moving into third, fourth generation, was developing, was becoming intersectional and nuanced, and the stories were still, I felt, limited to a kind of a rival story, or a story that is about deprivation or lack, either education or morals or finances or mobility, etc. And so there was this kind of generation of past and current and future of people that weren't allowed to see themselves as being anything other than, so for example, and I am talking specifically around the kind of mainstream, and I do this because it's normally say mainstream curated culture was like, I'd gone to, and in every single one of those plays, in order to see myself on stage, woman, Black, I had to imagine myself as a victim of a civil war, of the victim of violence, of the victim of sexual abuse and sexual violence. And I
think
like
I
wore
saw
that,
those plays as well.
right? Like, was just like, is this what the sector that I love, that I've committed my life to, that I've moved millions of times for, is this all it sees me as? And that I felt that we as a Black and African community needed to be able to see ourselves in other ways, but also needed to be able to see ourselves in our fullness. That, okay, if we take those 3 plays aside, if I wanted to see myself as a queer woman, I would need to forget that I was Black. If I wanted to see myself as queer, I would have to forget I was a woman. If I had to see myself as Black, I'd have to forget that I'm middle class now. Like, there were all these ways that I would have to sort of like contort myself in order to like just feel seen. And that I felt like Theatre for Hotzi should be a place in which you don't have to hide any of yourself, right? That you can come in your fullest, most nuanced, most complex, most complicated configuration, and we would go, we know you, we can pronounce your name, and we see you. And so the fact that I had felt alienated from this company, despite being sort of prime audience, prime artist for the company's sort of key demographic, was the pitch, right? How does this company make me feel African enough? By just seeing me. So that's an answer. I don't know if it answers anything of what you've said, because I've forgotten. Gbolahan.
No, I think it's useful. I think you know, in that you said that, you know, to see yourself is was a challenge, and in that challenge, I guess you felt more kind of empowered to articulate what you wanted to see, as much as also with, you know, this theatre company, you saw something already made that was catering to you, that potentially could empower you to also cater for others who have felt like you. And you know, and I guess actively, would you say that within some of your artistic programming, you've tried to you know, cater to women that look like you, as much as also those narratives and stories that haven't necessarily felt part of the, you know, quote unquote mainstream? And if any, sorry to add, if anyone has any questions, do feel free to either type them into the chat, or we'll call you to kind of read out your questions, so that, you know, it's not just, you know, me and Natalie spitballing at each other.
Yeah, and I'm going to be asking you questions. I'm sorry.
Right.
So I frustratingly, but with responsibility, see my job, because we only produce one show a year, very small scale. We're a national portfolio organization, funded but like tiny. That how can one multiply the narrative if you've only got one play a year to produce, one opportunity? And so instead, I have, for the last 5.5 years, looked at the rest of the sector, looked at where people were not being seen in their fullness, where the prevailing narratives were, and like try to specifically commission or produce in the opposition of that, right? So as a way of like subverting and naturally creating a multiple by having, you know, the Royal Court here doing that, and we'll do something completely different. This is a story of failure, because I had this moment where I realized that whilst all of the shows that I've made in the last 5 years have been made by women, and yeah, that's correct, that the writers or the people we see on stage have so often been black males. And this is a thing that I've been talking about for forever, and then realize that, oh, I'm also guilty of it, right? And whilst the power of the storytelling sits with women, you know, audiences don't see that. They see the story that is on stage. So for example, Good Dog by Arinze Kenny, which we did in 2017, and then in 2019, full female team making that, but male writer, male character. What felt subversive about that is that it was a monologue on the mid-scale. It was 2.5 hours long. It centered on the kind of black boy that doesn't get noticed because he's neither extraordinary or dangerous. He's like mediocre. And so the idea of holding space, giving space to this boy, this 13-year-old boy, 2.5 hours worth, and throwing, you know, 100,000 at this story felt political and subversive. Also, it's like majorly epic, and talks about, well, he's our sort of eyes and ears. It's about a multicultural Britain, and I felt that so often when we were allowed to see ourselves, it told us the lie that we are only ever in rooms that have other black people in them, and that is not my experience of my family, never mind rooms in a contemporary Britain. And so I wanted to create a kind of position ourselves as like the company for a multicultural Britain. It just happens to be that we always center on an African heritage protagonist at the heart. And there are other. We should talk about our commission, Gbolahan. I want to make sure that you get an opportunity to chat. So I went to Gbolahan with this podcast that I'd listened to on this series called Code Switch, which is this brilliant American political, cultural, racial podcast. And it had done this series on this school in Washington, D.C., that had been founded by a Black man who was sick of the education system failing Black boys, and so started this Black male school. And I love the activism of it. I love the radical action. I love the interventionalist, like, we will just roll up our sleeves and get into it to save and protect and advocate for our people. And Gbolahan is an artist of many disciplines that I have respected since that moment in Theatre Delights and at the Almeida, and had loved his play.
Don't lie.
Mad About the Boy. Mad About the Boy?
Yeah.
Yes, thank goodness. I had loved the play and loved the dialogue. And so we have a thing at Teatr Poensi, which is like, often people will write plays that they think are going to get produced, and that doesn't allow for multiplying the narrative. So we don't mind getting our hands dirty and going, actually, we love using artists, and here's an idea, and we want to match make you and see what you can find in this, what story you want to tell within this. And we did that with Gbolahan, who's writing this play. Go on, Gbolahan, over to you.
So I just thought it was a brilliant idea, as much as also I feel as if, it's that narrative of the activism within the Black community is one that has always felt like it's been erased or somewhat swept under the carpet or under-resourced, especially in this moment where in the past sort of decade there's been conversations about starting up independent schools, and most of those have a very specific agenda, as much as also in some cases catered to a very specific demographic in society that we don't necessarily belong to. And from what I know, there were certainly ways that the Black community has tried to intervene in the lack of appreciation for the education of Black children, by putting your children in Saturday schools, but and in some of those cases, some of those schools have again kind of disappeared or fallen on the wayside. So when Natalie kind of said, what if we tell this story about an independent school that was predominantly for Black boys, I was like, well, that's great, but then I have to be aware of the kind of patriarchal sort of narrative that is inherently woven into what exists within the source material, the stimulus, which is the the podcast and this school in America. Whereas over here there's probably more of more of a kind of social political consciousness to make that available for Black boys as well as Black girls, because they're both sort of being failed in different ways, as much as to a certain extent maybe there might be a small demographic of Black girls who will be pushed to try and attain the kind of schools sort of quotas and targets about attainment, whereas actually if they were placed in a school for Black predominantly just Black children, then that still is valid, perhaps even more so than them going to a kind of mixed demographic mixed comprehensive school. So that's what I've kind of pitched to Natalie, and she was like, "Yeah, that sounds great," and we've kind of ran with it and also made the staff in the school predominantly women. So it's the idea that, within the Black community, Black men perhaps might be missing, and Black men of a particular sort of status or particular level of success might be missing. But what if you put that narrative into a school whereby the idea of starting the school, very close to, literally what the kind of source material, the stimulus will start off by a Black man, but within it there's, and I have to add that that was part of the narrative. It was more an intervention about how Black boys don't necessarily have examples to look up to, especially Black, successful Black male examples, so that within the school, most of their teaching staff are all Black men. But for me, it felt necessary to counteract that narrative, because I know that a lot of the sort of responsibility with regards to education, especially in this country, is, perhaps more at the hands of Black women. So I wanted that to be a very kind of strongly affirmed narrative in the play. And, that's kind of where it's leaning. And, the first draft was good. The second draft is going to be better. So
it also reminds me in terms of the women. So I was reading the Black Lives Matter, one of the founders, their biography, in which they talk about the Black Panthers and the breakfast movement, and really thinking about the roles women have played in Black civil rights and activism. So I think it's a really good move of Gbolahan to reaffirm that. And the thing that I missed with the introduction is, like, this isn't just a Black school. This is where everyone is called kings, and they have to wear suits, and it's restorative justice. So it's really radical in its methods. Like, no one gets expelled. And I mean, it is challenging and not without its flaws. But like, yeah, it's radical love.
Essentially, yeah. So yeah, that sort of radical love is is a good way to kind of like explore from, I think. And I think that's kind of what has tethered us, if we want to see it as being tethered to this industry, and especially expressing ourselves through theatre. And and thinking about the, I don't know about you, but there's certainly loads of experiences that I've had where I've not necessarily felt like the access to progress through the industry has always been there, or the sense of embrace to develop as an artist, or to make work that I find challenging, or I want to challenge myself by, has been there. And therein comes the adage of once one opportunity, one chance to succeed. And even if you succeed, it doesn't necessarily lead on to other kind of opportunities to add to your canon of work, as much as also to progress your skills as an artist, essentially. So how have you found a way to sustain the radical love? And maybe you go, actually you've created or you've been gifted an opportunity to be a little bit autonomous in that, but then obviously you're still beholden to what Arts Council kind of request of you as much as the resources that you have. So have you found in your pursuit of, you know, of what you want to do, the radical love that you have for your art and the community, you've still been somewhat inhibited? Or you know, have you found a level of freedom in, you know, being the artistic leader of Theatre Forti?
No. So yes, I have been gifted, but also worked very hard to have the autonomy of thought, um, and the autonomy of agitation. But as an organisation, we are funded to the level where we can keep a core staff, but we can't produce autonomously. So what that actually means is that whilst we are trying to subvert the singular narrative, we're trying to be intersectional, we're trying to be radical about the ways in which Black people live. I mean, it's not radical, it's just we're trying to make culture reflect actual life. We still have to convince those big mainstream organisations about Black people's humanity, is really how it boils down, and because we can't do it without them. And if we want to be in a space, in a theatre space, we can't do it, you know, we can't do it without them physically either. So it's been really frustrating because it's like being at the table but having your hands tied, and there's a kind of, it doesn't make sense to, I think, fund organisations with really diverse and important demographically specific visions at a half level where they can't actually, they're not independent. Because that means it empowers the same gatekeepers. So it's been really frustrating. And, you know, it has, and again, to continue to speak candidly, like I wore a heavy burden. Like I burnt out last year as I realized, you know, I'd been 5 years into a conversation with a big organization that, you know, had been stringing me along for 5 years. And I realized that, obviously, because I'm Black, when I'm fighting for the humanity of Black characters, Black stories, I'm also fighting for my own humanity. And so when they say no, for whatever reason, they're not acknowledging my humanity. And that's like difficult. Like this shit is personal in a way that if I were running, I don't know, headlong or whatever, like, you know, I'm not gonna get upset about not being able to produce Shakespeare. But it is really difficult when this brilliant play about, you know, a grieving a woman we're told that it's not African enough or whatever. So it's been tough, is the reality of it. I noticed that we have some questions in the chat to you.
Yeah.
I got one privately and then another from Olu. Do you want to make, sorry to...
No, it's calm.
Like the depressing shit at you and then...
So do we try and tackle this? What do you think is the future of theatre post-COVID?
For me, the legacy of COVID for me is our fear about the things that we can't see, whereas pre-COVID we were scared of the things that we could see, right? So Brexit is a fear vote. You know, racism is about fear, and now there is this invisible thing to be scared of. So how that relates to theatre is that I'm worried about our ability to share things and to be in shared spaces and to want to be together, and wonder what that will mean for theatre. I'm going to ask you that.
Adding to that, I think you're right. I think it's about erasure, the fear of erasure, and not necessarily being, you know, metaphorical and physical casualties of the stories that are being told, and as even if the narrative is about uplifting people out of the experience of COVID, whether we, and it could be a catch-22 situation where we're used as foils for uplifting society and community, whereas actually we're not necessarily given any more sort of power or autonomy, or there's no kind of systemic change within industries, organizations and institutions with regards to how Black artists are welcomed, and the platforms that Black artists have to make work, and to feel very much a fabric of the kind of artistic narrative of progression in this country. So I think in a way, the future, as Natalie has said, is completely unknown. It's an unknown quantity, but the fear is about erasure or being misappropriated for the upliftment of society in some ways, because there's a lot of narrative about pain that we're trying to move away from, but upon reflection, in recent months, there's been, a lot of pain and a lot of disorientation that potentially has to do with mental, health issues, as well as also, survival. Most importantly, the fact that, whether you're an artist or just, a frontline worker, trying to make ends meet, it's all about how you can still be present and feel like, your trajectory hasn't been kind of intercepted or somehow derailed because of COVID. So I think those are probably, fundamental concerns for myself, as much as also I have family members who have, similar concerns, and friends who are in the industry who are kind of going, what's it all gonna look like whenever post-COVID is? Because at the moment we still don't know when post-COVID is, because although we're being told we can go out, make sure you wear your mask because it's not gone, and that's frightening. That's a frightening state of existence to kind of carry around. I'll ask another question. Natalie and Gbolahan, do you think that British theatre has a problem with plays and all black British cast? Apologies for the typo. So Natalie and Gbolahan, do you think that British theatre has a problem with plays with and all Black British cast? Natalie? I would say no. They use us to bankroll their craft. Like, I don't know. I think that's me. Like, go on.
Well, they use all Black British male cast to bankroll.
Right.
Yeah. Let's, One Night in Miami, Barbershop Chronicles, I love you, and you know what? It's a great show, but like, come on now. I don't know that it's the same for women. Like, I can't. Oi, that's Obi Puff Puff just getting hit up about it too. British I think that they consider it for longer, perhaps, than they consider all white cast, right? Plays with all white cast. And that because for so long we've been told that white is neutral, that white is our starting position, and that anyone can imagine themselves into the white gaze, and to have anything cast that isn't white, I think they feel their sort of unconscious bias and their, you know, their latent institutional racism says that has niche appeal, or, you know, so we'll get, oh, like, we don't have many Black audiences, or we've had X show, which is about, you know, I remember trying to sell Good Dog in your play Pigeon English, because they'd had Pigeon English 2 years before. It was like they couldn't do Good Dog, like, because, you know, they'd already got their audience. They've been in once in 2 years.
No way.
Yeah. It's wild. Anyway, so I think there is some hesitance. I think there is, but, you know, I think our argument always is that actually a Black cast have more in common with more people than that kind of white cishet middle to upper class male position, and that people of color, Black people, are the new Joe Blogs, every man, woman. And I think the more we can make that argument that, like, you know, it's like when they talk about colorblind casting, like, you've got to forget I'm Black to be able to, or not see that I'm Black in order to believe that I can be a doctor or a king or whatever. Like, that again sort of perpetuates this idea that somehow the Blackness is like a barrier. Yes, I'm not saying that white is neutral. I'm not saying that anyone can imagine themselves into the white gaze. I think that that's what they believe. Let's just get this 100% clear, everyone. On the recording, in the room, Obi, I'm not saying.
Thumbs up from David, so yeah.
Can you imagine? A Black leader of Black theatre company says white is neutral. No. Being a Black queer woman is neutral. Thank you. Obi's on the same page. Anyway, go on.
Okay, so these messages are coming in thick and fast. We've got 10 minutes or 9 minutes. So I'm going to try and keep it quick, or we've got to try and respond quickly. Olushola says, congratulations. Can you talk more about your hopes and plans at Brixton House? I think we're just going to be more, hopefully, community-centric, and try to support the artist as much as we can, but also have a real sort of eye on how to integrate more theatricality across Brixton, which hopefully allows for more opportunity. But that's between us in this room, okay? So don't take that anywhere else. That's between us, because it's all still forming as well. So, but yeah. And then Wofi said, what would you say are the most likely perpetrators of questioning the Black and African enoughness of a piece you pitch, and what reasons do they give to justify their point of view?
I think it was the pivot where I started talking about second and third generation experience. I started talking about like I saw a bunch of plays where if you remove the Blackness, there would be no dramatic arc, no dramatic tension, no dramaturgy, essentially. And so I was like, can we just take for granted that there will be Black people in this play always, and that it will speak to the African experience by not speaking to the African experience? And so I think they were just shot like when it wasn't set in Africa, or there wasn't, you know, yeah, it was pretty basic. And when called on it, they sort of backtracks a little bit. But like, you know, I think they are surprised by the shows we pitch to them, and like, good. Like, I don't want to be pitching shows to you that you think I'm going to pitch or that you can imagine. There's no point in me producing those plays if you can already imagine them, innit? Like, I can't get over this Matilda thinking that I said white. I have to give that white, isn't it? Where is Matilda? Who is this? That show your face, Matilda.
Just to add to that, should you write the stories of your ancestors to make it accessible, or is there another space for such stories?
there's space for all of the stories. All of the stories. That's the point. It's just when we are only allowed to tell one or two stories over and over and over and over again. So we commission loads of guest writers for our blog, and someone just wrote a kind of love letter to her ancestors. There's room for all of those stories. Whoever asked that, I'm lost in the questions. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're right, and I think. Should you make it accessible, or is there another space for such stories? I think, you know, it's all accessible, and I guess it's about framing. So when I think someone else kind of put a question about this later down. So like when Terrell Alvin McCraney did the kind of synthesis of the Yoruba pantheon with the kind of black sort of African American experience of brothers and brother size or whatever, you kind of go, that's potentially really difficult for people to kind of take the leap of faith to kind of imagine or understand what the pantheon has to do with it, because it's essentially a story about brothers in Florida, or which I think is where it's set, where Terrell's from. So I think it's all accessible, and it's stories, and it's your perspective on a particular set of circumstances or a situation that you want to put your characters in. So I think you're good to go, sort of thing. We've got 4 minutes. Anyway, yeah. Perhaps should add, I was referring to Black British stories as opposed to African American. Okay.
I mean, I would say that it is easier, I think, in the mainstream culture for them to program plays that still position us as other because we're American or whatever, rather than Black British.
I have another question here. I have had resistance when writing Yoruba, which is authentic to the character, but how do I bring an audience along? Natalie?
Me? Hey, people, don't talk to me. I mean...
You say I'm Igbo, don't talk to me.
Yeah. No, listen, look at me, like claiming this person who's like, oh yeah, I didn't even know I was Black. Now I'm very proudly Igbo with my Igbo dog. I have problems. Okay. I would say what is most important is storytelling and character. And like audiences, like we need to give audiences and white producers and programmers need to give audiences due respect, that they are able to do really complex and difficult journeys in their imagination. They're able to handle complex language. Like, I think you're fine. Whoever asked that question, you're fine. And white audiences can handle it, and because that's who we're worried about, I guess. Yeah, you're fine. Just make the story great and the characters rich, as in richly defined. Oh dear. And that's all you need to worry about.
I think that's right, and I think it is about the authenticity of the character and how, to a certain extent, you might take into consideration that not everyone that comes to meet and receive that story is going to be Yoruba. So for the most part, they might be able to access the kind of the language and what being communicated in the language quicker than everyone else. But then it's if you definitely wanted to kind of take into consideration the audience's reception of what is being interpreted or communicated at a particular point, then you perhaps can use another character in the scene as an access point for other people who are not of that tribe or understand the language to kind of mediate what you're trying to do there. But for the most part, as Natalie said, you don't necessarily have to, what's the word I'm looking for? Placate people's kind of sense of exclusion, because, once your story's kind of like, strong enough, people will just go along with where you want to take them, rather than kind of going, oh, it's a shame that I didn't understand, the cuss words that they were, or or what they were saying in Yoruba and stuff like that. So yeah. What is those problems? I also like the question, what is neutral? Oh my God.
And to who? A neutral is different, isn't it? It's a very good question. Is that Will? I can't, yeah, very good question.
Yeah.
Don't know that.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it was more a rhetorical question.
Well, I still answered it though.
Yeah. I think we have to stop. I don't know, Moji. I've got to run into another Zoom in like.
Okay. All right. Well, that's been great. Thank you all so much. Thank you for joining us, and thank you, Natalie. Thank you, Gbolahan. Thank you, Rob, and thanks everyone for joining us.
Everyone show themselves now. Come on. So, I'm waiting for you, Matilda.
I see David, I see Wofi. I see how you're doing.
Yes.
Ollie, hi.
Kem, I see you.
Where's Matilda? This is
Matilda. Matilda. Where are you? There she is.
Hello.
He's coming for you, Natalie.
Yes, she was.
No, I wasn't.
Hi, everybody. Well, thank you all so much. Thanks for joining us. See you again soon.
Take care.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.
They're amazing. They're amazing. Keep coming, people. We'll
do. Thank you. Thank you, people. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Natalie.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.